Bar for Bar album reviews. Busta Rhymes, Extinction Level Event 2, The Wrath of God. Extinction Level Event 2, The Wrath of God is the 10th studio album from legendary rapper Busta Rhymes. This album comes in as a follow-up to the original, which dropped in 1998. We've also been expecting this album for quite some time, as Busta Rhymes has mentioned it as far back as 2014 and possibly earlier. We also heard a lot about it from the producer Ninth Wonder a couple years back. This project reintroduces us to the idea of an extinction level event, which, given all that's happened this year, is pretty appropriate, I'd say. This project comes in at a total runtime of 1 hour and 17 minutes with 22 tracks for the standard edition, and 1 hour and 34 minutes with 26 tracks for the reloaded edition that dropped a couple of days later. So this album is long. However, I feel like that's okay for this project because even with the reloaded edition, my attention was held pretty well, I'd say. Another thing of note with this album is that it has been worked on for a long time, so I have no idea whether these songs were written years ago or recently, but it all sounded pretty crisp still. Also, with this project, just like the original, I think Bus is referring to himself as an extinction level event in terms of rap, only due to the braggadociousness that we got on a lot of the tracks here. The album starts off with the Extinction Level Event 2 intro, which starts off the album similarly to the original but almost reversed in the order it goes. So instead of it starting off with the child asking what the world's going to look like in the year 2000 at the beginning of the track, it's flipped down at the end of the track where she's asking what it's going to be like in 2021. We also then just get some rapping from Busta Rhymes and Rakim, which is introduced by Chris Rock, who's basically the DJ drama of this album, I feel. This intro verse from Bus acts as a way to let listeners, old and new, know what he's about to do on this project and what this project is for. He also makes references to the original Extinction Level Event, where he apparently was fighting demons and had personal scores to settle. He also brings up the film Deep Impact, where Morgan Freeman was the president, and how we got a similar end of the world sort of movie with 2012, but Danny Glover was president there. He also mentions how he was getting a little paranoid about Obama being president too, and now the world's basically ending now that he isn't president anymore. Rakim then comes in with a dope verse that continues on these end of the day themes and thoughts, with the first line making reference to his first album, The Seventh Seal. That album talks about the end of the world, old world that is, and the transition to the new world. Rakim keeps going with the ideas about the end of days with references to both the Bible and the Quran. It's overall a great track, and at times I feel like the skit was separate from the song, but it works. After one of the longest intros, and I mean that in the best way possible, we get one of the shortest tracks on this project, The Purge. And this song is pretty dope, because it really just has Buzz going through the purge, and it sounds like the purge siren is going off in the instrumental too. This track really feels like it was written recently to me, just because it seems to be referencing the protests and the riots that came up out of them. It starts off with Busta Rhymes saying, "Sorry country, I know you don't want this really, but till we get some justice, we fucking every city up." This isn't a new sentiment though, so I could totally have seen this being written before 2020. However, I really do like its inclusion this early on though, because it brings further attention to the idea of extinction level events and how 2020 is turning out to be just that. I also like the beat because it fits the theme really well. This then transitions really smoothly to the next track, Strap Yourself Down, which features production from both Pete Rock and Jay Dilla. This track switches things up a bit and has Busta Rhymes basically just talking about how dope he is and how dope his homies are. There's not a whole lot here to say regarding the track. I mean, it's solid and we get some fun voices from Busta Rhymes as we typically do. And yeah, I just think this track is one of those ones where it's Busta Rhymes who is the extinction level event rather than him referring to anything else in particular. Czar is a fun track to me, and I think that's mostly due to the beat and how Bus just flows on this, as well as his aggression. The track also samples Annie Up by M.O.P., and he just says here that he's the leader of the new shit, brand new Czar, which is an interesting take considering how long he's been around. Is he trying to say that even though rap is different now, he's the new leader? Maybe. This again is one of those braggadocious tracks where I just feel like Bus is just trying to reinforce the idea that he himself is the extinction level event. But it could also just very well be him talking his shit. Bus then continues to get samples flipped into new tracks with Out of My Mind, which samples Poison by Belle Biv DeVoe. And this track is really fun because it's a sample that a lot of people recognize, but he also matches his flow exactly to the beat. Again, we get this braggadocious Busta Rhymes, but that's totally fine because it's a fun track. He brings up how he's back in the spot to make him wild again, and how he's bouncing on the beat like the way that others should. I think the inclusion of the previous track and Czar are meant to put the listener into this sort of 90s rap album sort of vibe, since they both sample songs from back then, as well as Busta Rhymes just having fun with his raps. This then brings us to Extinction Level Event 2, The Wrath of God, which is the title track, obviously, but it features a speech of sorts from Louis Farrakhan. However you may feel about him is fine and valid, I guess, but that's not the topic at hand. The gist of what he's trying to say, though, is that the powers that be cannot continue to suppress and kill black people, and something has to change. Read into that as much as you want. Busta Rhymes then has a verse which brings back the idea that Bus himself is the Extinction Level Event, because he starts off with, God has sent me to make you all feel the wrath and the cometh. In his verse, he talks about all the bullshit that's been happening this year, as well as just in general. He mentions how there's been so many protests and marches already and nothing has changed yet, and he's truly upset about it. There's also mentions about how God will protect you from all the negativity and will help you push through and get what's deserved, essentially. I also appreciate that he says, care for your woman, your mother, and your children. It's necessity, because I feel like that's not said enough. It's definitely an interesting track, and that does well to, continue on the theme of this album. But your mileage may vary with your own thoughts of Farrakhan and what Bus is trying to say. Slow Flow is a fun track, which features ODB on the chorus, which is pulled directly from Brooklyn Zoo, which I thought was dope. The beat itself is kind of weird and kind of reminds me of retro video games, but it's fine, it works. Busta Rhymes' first verse isn't really anything too out of the ordinary from what we've seen so far. However, with the second verse, we hear a lot of call-outs to classic albums like Reasonable Doubt, Illmatic, Midnight Marauders, and many more, really. His listing of these albums ends with Extinction Level Event 2, which makes it seem like he's placing this album in the upper echelon of rap projects. Time will tell, though, if he's just full of himself or if it's actually going to be up there and be considered one of the greats. Next, we get Don't Go, featuring Q-Tip. And this track seems to be about retiring, with the chorus mentioning, I'm leaving the game, they begging to do Don't Go. However, with Busta's verse, it seems like he's more acknowledging that sometimes he disappears for a while before putting out a project when he says, I do have a tendency to do what's great and leave. To be fair, the last proper album we got from him was like 2009, I believe, as well as the Abstract and the Dragon mixtape from 2014. I mean, he takes his time, especially with this album, since the first mentions of it were like 2014. With Busta's verse, he also references Q-Tip's verse from a Ward tour, which is pretty cool since he's featured here. But it's also not really surprising because they've collaborated quite a bit in the past. Q-Tip's verse goes in a different direction, with him talking directly to Bus, and how he understands that sometimes it takes a while to get your music done. Sometimes you got writer's block, or sometimes you just don't want to write. But he also says, let's take it back to the days you were battling, because that hopefully will give him some inspiration. I suppose Q-Tip's verse also reinforces the idea of retirement, because he ends it with, if your time came before mine, I'd be like, don't go. But who knows? I don't really have anything to say about Boom, other than I enjoyed the RZA reference / shout out with Bobby Digital bang your head, bong bong. I was wondering why I enjoyed True Indeed, and that's because it samples Busta Rhymes' Woo-Ha, and that's also just one of my favorite songs from him. It's also produced by DJ Premier, so that definitely helps too. It's funny because this track starts off with this lyrical miracle sort of rap, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it's always funny to hear. The mathematician of this rap expedition masters the precision of faster addition after you listen. I mean, I just always get a kick out of that sort of rapping. This track again continues on some of the braggadociousness of Busta Rhymes, especially with the second verse. I just don't know how I feel about him ending the track with fart sounds. It seems a little immature, but he's also having fun, so I can't hate on him for that. And for the longest time, I actually thought that this was part of the next track, Master Fard Muhammad, since the song is quite a bit shorter and flowed really well into that track. But the track Master Fard Muhammad features Rick Ross and is named after the founder of the Nation of Islam. The song fits Rick Ross's rap style really well because the beat is more laid back and sounds luxurious. Ross's verse gives a brief history of Master Fard Muhammad, where he started off as a door-to-door salesman selling silks, but also just used that to spread his knowledge. Both Ross and Busta Rhymes compare themselves to Fard Muhammad with the way that they're spreading knowledge and opening people's third eye so that they can really see what's going on. On Busta Rhymes' verse, he says, listen to these words with the power to fuel rockets, just in the same time, so it's perfect for me to drop this. Which makes it seem like this was recently written, or at least he knew that whenever he would release this song or album, that would be the perfect time to drop it. Youll features Anderson .Paak on both vocals and the production. And the song itself was kind of meh to me when it first came out as a single, but in the context of the album, it does sound better. And the song itself is basically just about people messing with them and talking shit, not realizing that they'll just bust at you and confront them. It also touches on getting your money from the people that owe you. Oh No is one of those tracks on this project where Busta Rhymes is just talking his shit. Like, he's trying to get at, what he's trying to get at here is that he's better than most of y'all other rap dudes out there. And basically, he compares them all to caca. Hell, he starts off saying, what's the problem? Fuck you talking about? I got him. Which makes it seem like he's addressing the people doubting him. He also just kind of uses that as a starting point for some of his lyrics. I mean, overall, though, it's a pretty solid track, and I would imagine it'd be pretty good for workouts, too. Next, we have The Dawn of the Boss, which features Vibes Cartel. I don't really care for the song, but I guess I see its appeal. What I really enjoy about this track is the skit that we get at the end that intros the next track, Best I Can. The skit is between Busta Rhymes and his ex, where he calls to let her know, yo, he's gonna come pick up his son to spend time with him. Best I Can features Rhapsody, and the track goes further into the struggles of having a child when you, as the parents, are split. Rhapsody takes on the persona of the woman in this relationship, where she's looking back at all the shade that was thrown at the father, Busta Rhymes. Her verse is full of apologies and thanks, which is great to hear. And sometimes when people split, they have a lot of tension and resentment towards each other, so it's not surprising that they would say bad things about their exes. I think Rhapsody's verse is coming from someone who is basically saying that that man ain't shit. Even though he made the child support payments, still spent money on the child and spent time with him, and stuck around just doing his best. It seems like she's realized this and is now looking back at all the things that she said and realized that she should or could be doing more to help. Busta Rhymes' verse is basically just a response to that realization, like, yeah, you're right. You should have been more thankful and shouldn't have disrespected me. But he wants to do what's best for his son, and that's why he's always tried to treat her with respect when the son's around. He also brings up the cause of their split, which seems to just be the constant arguing, but due to that, he's been able to find someone that makes him happy too. Now, I'm not saying that this is what happens every time partners split when there's a child involved, but it's definitely an interesting perspective since it's one that we don't hear too often. This then goes into Where I Belong, featuring Mariah Carey. And this song really reminds me of those 90s/2000 songs with a rapper and a singer, and it just works really well. As far as what the track's about, it's just saying how they've been waiting and looking for someone like them for the longest time. And now that they found each other, they've come to the conclusion that this is right where they belong. Nothing too deep or crazy here, but it's a cool song that really just takes me back, you know? Deep Thought is a track where it feels like Busta Rhymes wanted to slow things down a bit. He's got a lot on his mind and he's trying to find ways to relax. Like, he wants to find a place that's tranquil so he can meditate. And it seems like that place is with a significant other, or supposedly. She wants to make him feel better and help take his mind off things, but that's not always the easiest thing to do. The thing that seems to be weighing heaviest on his mind right now is his rap career. He enjoys it, but he also has to deal with the frog voice that comes from doing shows back to back. And he also starts to think about how he's done all this for vanity's sake. The other major thing that's on his mind is the passing of Chris Lighty and his father. He's come to the realization that life's short, so he's working hard to be able to provide for his kids to make sure they're good. It's also really tough for him because some of the things that are going on in his head, he can't really tell his significant other out of fear that she'd be upset. And this is something that a lot of men struggle with. Like, we've been told our entire lives basically to just be emotionless and not talk about our feelings, so when we think about talking, we find reasons not to, such as, they might just get upset. Which is also why many, like Bus, resort to smoking or drinking to kind of ease their minds. Deep thought actually flows really well into the next skit, The Young God Speaks, which also flows really well into the next track, Look Over Your Shoulders, featuring Kendrick Lamar. And this track features a sample from the Jackson 5's I'll Be There, specifically just Michael Jackson's part. And having this track come on right after Deep Thought gives it so much more meaning than if you were just listening to the track alone, because it's almost like a reminder to Bus that there are people there to support him whenever he needs it. As I mentioned on the breakdown that I did for it, it also just seems that it's talking about hip-hop in general and how both him and Kendrick are there for hip-hop and hip-hop is there for them in turn. This track is just so good. I'm glad that we got an official release of it. The collaborations continue with the track You Will Never Find Another Me featuring Mary J. Blige. This track is pretty straightforward and doesn't stray far from the title. You'll never find another Busta Rhymes or Mary J. We get a pretty introspective verse from Bus at the end where it seems like he's reminiscing about where he came from and remembering all the pain that he's gone through in his career. He also mentions how if we don't do it, who else is going to do it the way we do it? Which is basically just him saying, no one else can do what we do. Once we're gone, ain't no one going to replace us. As the album begins to wrap up, we get the track Freedom. This track touches on a lot of the racial inequality issues that have been even more prominent this year than in years past. It's a very powerful track where Busta Rhymes just kind of sounds tired of all the bullshit that's been happening for so long, and I don't blame him. He's tired of the treatment of black people in white America, and everyone should be too. There's literally no moral reason for the inequalities that exist, and it's just frustrating that we live in a place where not enough is being done to combat it. Hell, even the people that you would expect to fight against it are the ones doing it. This track is almost like a call to arms of sorts, but not necessarily to incite violence, but to inspire others to rise up and fight for what they believe in. The final track on the album proper is Satanic. This track goes into the idea that there's a lot of people doing satanic things or worshiping Satan in the music industry. I wouldn't necessarily go as far as saying that these people are devil worshippers or anything, but I would say that they're kind of just let money and greed overtake them. They're basically now just going through the motions of music rather than putting stuff out that has proper substance and meaning to it. I feel like this is more addressing newer artists than anyone else because a lot of the new and popular rappers don't necessarily have the same substance. Sure, they can make bangers and songs that are fun to listen to, but to Busta Rhymes, that's not what it's all about. At least that's what I got from it. Now, I'll just go briefly through all the tracks from the Reloaded, since it came out pretty quickly after the standard edition. Blowing the Speakers is again one of those braggadocious tracks. The beat is cool, but it's not something that I would expect Busta Rhymes to rap on. The first verse really felt like a continuation of the chorus, so it just felt really long, because he just had the same flow for most of it, which was a little weird. And then in the second verse, he just had a little bit of that Migos flow, which is cool, I guess, but, whatever. I personally wasn't really feeling this track, but you might, so check it out. The second bonus we got is Who Are You, which really just sounds like he's trying to say rep your hood. Alternatively, it could just be him genuinely asking, who are you, why you here, or something like that. There's also a bit of a vocal effect on him for a lot of the track, which I don't really think was necessary, but that's just me again. The third track is Hope Your Dreams Come True, which is basically him just shutting down rappers and others who think that they dope, because they really haven't proven themselves yet. He makes it sound like he's willing to take them under his wing, but only if they're with it. This track also just kind of feels like he's trying to teach new rappers about how to move in the industry, and given that he's been around for a while, they may want to listen to him. The final bonus that we get is Calm Down, featuring Eminem, which actually came out back in 2014. So it's definitely an interesting inclusion, seeing that it's been out for a while, but it's a dope song nonetheless. The video itself actually portrays Busta Rhymes as the Incredible Hulk and Eminem as Superman. Honestly, it's just a fun song, and I'm glad that we got a long-ass verse from both of them. Overall, Extinction Level Event 2 was a great album and a great return for Busta Rhymes. As a follow-up to the original, I think it did a fantastic job of keeping the themes and ideas pretty similar. Although this wasn't really meant to be a concept album, the ideas of an Extinction Level Event were carried through pretty well, I'd say. Everything also flowed really well, like from track to track, and that's just not common enough, to be honest. At first I was a little concerned that the album would be too long to hold my interest, but like I mentioned, that's definitely not the case here. Another thing I want to bring up are the skits. I'm still not sure how I feel about them being included in the songs themselves rather than separate tracks. I mean, because with the way it is right now, it almost feels like you have to listen to the album all the way through so that the skits work when you want to listen to one of your favorite songs. However, if they weren't included, it's entirely possible that people just wouldn't even bother listening to them, so I get it. I also do want to say that I preferred the second half of the project after the Don and the Boss over the first, but that's entirely due to subject matter. My favorite tracks here are The Purge, Czar, Don't Go, Best I Can, Look Over Your Shoulders, Freedom, and Satanic. I think Busta Rhymes did a fantastic job returning with this project. I know we had to wait a long time for this, but I'm glad we finally got it. Hopefully we don't have to wait as long for another Busta Rhymes project, but I'm okay with waiting if this is what we're going to be getting. Anyways, that's all I got. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this album and what your favorite tracks are. Also, like and subscribe if you want to see more reviews like this one. And, thank you for watching. Please stay safe out there.